So Eduardo Escobar gets sent to the LA Angels. And what I think is interesting about this move to go get Coleman Crow and Landon Marceau, did I say that right?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so.
Marceau.
Marceau. I love when LSU has players who have the
The old
AUX.
Bayou name.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I feel like they have to recruit one or two of those guys a year. Like
Yeah.
it's a necessity.
No, they got a Braden Jobert and a Cade Beloso in the lineup right now.
It's unbelievable. I love it.
Gavin
So
Dugas. Yeah.
they get so the Mets, they cover Eduardo Escobar's salary, which is, yeah, that's what Uncle Steve does. But they cover the salary to get two pitching prospects here. Because if you don't cover Escobar's salary, you get nothing. Maybe you get a DSL flyer, but you're not getting anything good. They get Coleman Crow and they get Marshall. I think it's an interesting return given that, it's a player that, shouldn't get you much, that they literally bought these prospects. Coleman Crow has been one of the more interesting case studies in minor league baseball because he's a Southern League guy. He was always a sneaky fastball kind of guy. Like data wise, it didn't jump off the page in terms of IVB, but he just got so many whiffs on the fastball at the top of the zone. And then this year, he was one of the biggest gainers in IVB. He was one of the biggest gainers in just basically fastball shape and was highlighted in Baseball America's piece. But I want to give him a little bit of credit because you could highlight the tacked ball and say, oh, yeah, that's why he saw the big jump and induced vertical break. I was looking more into it after the trade. He adjusted his release point drastically. We talk about VAA, vertical attack angle, vertical approach angle. He was like -5 before. 4 is elite. He's got himself down to right around the low 4s. So that's also going to help induce vertical break, and a tacked ball is not going to do much of that. So I think it's the combination of that. I think Crow's a legit pitching prospect. He's been on the IL. They haven't said what the injury is, but before that, he was carving up through AA through his 4 starts. Hopefully, it's nothing serious. I assume it's not if the Mets are trading for him. But 22 years old, Crow has really, I think, solidified himself as a legitimate pitching prospect, even if you want to highlight the tax balls.
Yeah. I mean, shame on me. Like I can't. I don't know. I can't wait for mid-July when they come back from the All-Star break and they're not using this because I just immediately default to discounting guys in the Southern League. Like
Yes.
Pat Montverde in the Marlins system, like I just discount anything he's doing because of tack baseball, which is really like shame on me, right? I shouldn't be doing that. Like some of these guys are actually like throwing really well. Look at Ben Brown. Like Ben Brown was throwing really well. He just happened to be using that tack baseball. So it's hard for me to buy 4 stars from Coleman Crow, but I can appreciate, what you're saying with the other stuff. Like I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, bullshit. Like, nope, tack ball. Don't believe it. Like, let's see him do it elsewhere. But I do think that was a good get for, I mean, a guy that was sunk weight on that Mets roster and in the Mets payroll.
100%. And another thing to note with Crow is you have the adjusted release point. You have an uptick in fastball velocity by 1.3 miles per hour. In those 4 starts, maybe it would have fallen off a little bit as the season went on because we're comparing to all of last year, but an uptick in velocity and the tack ball. So I think it was a culmination of things that allowed him to hold opponents to a 114 batting average through 4 starts. But ultimately, this is a guy that looked better. I understand okay, well, what's he gonna do with another baseball? We'll find out. But I think that this was a better version of him regardless. And it's a nice pickup for a Mets system that is razor thin when it comes to pitching. I mean, it's Mike Vassell, it's Blade Tidwell, and then they've had a couple guys step up and perform. Who'd you say?
Jose Budo.
Jose Pudo. Of course, another injury setback to the guy that's supposed to be their best arm and, isn't throwing this year. So it's an interesting spot. This is just a good opportunity to pick up a couple arms. We'll go to Marceau real quick. He's more of a depth arm to me. 6 foot, $180, 23 years old. He's kind of low 90s, but he's thrown well-ish for the most part this year. He's been pretty solid. He's had a couple blow-up outings. I think this was just like, give us another arm with Coleman Crow. I really think Coleman Crow was the focus here. I know Marchot comes with some draft intrigue in the past. There's room for him to be a good depth arm. I think Crow's a guy that you're hoping can find a way to being a big league starter. And that was the focus of the package. But Marchot, he's low 90s fastball, mixes in a cutter, change up, sinker, slider. Like he's throwing the whole kitchen sink at you, curveball. He's got like 6 different pitches that he mixes in 10% of the time because he kind of has to. But he's still a good arm to add into the fold here and would, crack their top 30 prospects. But Coleman Crow is the piece here.
One thing to note with Marceau, his ground ball rate, like I immediately go to his ground ball rate because his Ks per 9 is like well under 9. So I go here and I'm like, okay, what's going on? He might have been negatively hindered by this tacked ball because the ground ball rate went from 56% at high A last year to 45% this year. So I'm thinking maybe like a sinking fastball turns dead zoney with that tack ball in the Southern League.
Very possible. It could also affect the cutter, which the cutter is a pitch that, is largely a feel pitch. You grip it. A lot of guys grip it pretty similar to the fastball and kind of just let the arm action take care of it. If it's sticking to your hand a little bit more, he might be ripping that with a little bit more horizontal instead of gyro or whatever it may be. I'd have to look into it, but that's an excellent point as a guy that was using a fastball that gets him ground balls and a cutter that was supposed to get him weak contact and ground balls and a sinker that, he has used less this year for a reason. Maybe the feel for that sinker hasn't been there the same. Like as the season has gone on, he has phased out the sinker more and more, which is bizarre given his success as a ground ball pitcher last year. So that is important to note. And again, like I'm just can't wait for presumably July 13th when they stop using these stupid balls and we can actually figure out the numbers behind these guys and have the data be applicable. So that will be nice.